Hu, who's going to be speaking on behalf of his PI, which is Lijun Liu from the University of Illinois, on simulating mantle convection and seismic anisotropy with data assimilation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jiashun Hu. I'm the first presenter of this session. The topic is simulating mantle convection and seismic anisotropy with data assimilation. And yeah, we have a collaborator, Manurif Channa, who is from University of Padua, Italy. He helped us with seismic anisotropy, and we got some, when we're doing this project, we got many help from the NCSA team. For example, Ryan, who helped us install the code, and the team of Bill, Darren, and Ethan helped us with input and output with HDF5. So let's begin talk this project. Before I talk details of this project, I first introduce you the key concepts of plate subduction. So as you can see in this animation, the left side is the oceanic plate and the right side is a continent. And below these plates are the hot asthenosphere. Because of the density difference, the oceanic plate tries to subduct into the continental plates, as you can see in this movie. So as the plate subducts, it is called a slab. Slab is essentially the subducted plate. It's in the mantle. So as you can see, subduction has very significant influence on the surface topography. For example, the mountains. So that's part of the reason we study mantle convection. So why it matters? As I mentioned, one of the reasons is we wanted to get a better idea of how the Earth works. Traditionally, we know that in the mantle, hot anomalies, like buoyant anomalies, rise up, and dense anomalies sinks into the deeper mantle. This forms a mantle convection. When the mantle convection will drive the plate motion, when the two plates converge, there's mountains, such as here. When the two plates diverge, there's mid-ocean ridges. And this is very basic concepts of mantle convection. But the real Earth is much more complex. By modeling the mantle convection, we can discuss these, more detailedly with the mechanism of the mantle convection. And also, there are a lot of natural hazards in this world, such as earthquakes and volcanisms. By simulating mantle convection, we can have an idea of how this happens, although we cannot predict them at present. So the key challenges here for modeling mantle convection is first clean up the boundary conditions. We know the Earth is very complex, and the Earth's history is also complex, and we have very limited constraints on the formation, on the motions and the age of the plates, which are actually the boundary conditions for our model. So first, we needed to clean up the boundary conditions. Then, because the Earth has very different compositions, so they have very different rheologies in different parts. So this large viscosity contrast will significantly slow down the convergence of the solver. And also it requires higher resolution to resolve this very large viscosity contrast. So this actually poses a major problem for us. So other challenges include unknown processes and properties in the mantle, such as the generation and the behavior of the magma in the mantle wedge, and the property of the plumes in the deep mantle. But modeling this mantle convection, we can get a better idea of these processes. So now let's talk about the potential problems with existing models. The first class of models is like in the left column. They are mostly 2D models, and they cannot directly compare with observation. And later, 3D models are designed, but they have a very idealized boundary conditions. Again, this cannot be compared with the real Earth. So more recently, people designed the 3D models and with very complex boundary conditions. However, such as this model, they cannot resolve the plate boundary or the subduction zone, which is the most complex part of the Earth, which is also the most challenging part for the modeling. So they just fixed the change so it does not evolve dynamically. So our purpose is to modeling the South American subduction, but we take into account the plate motion and the seafloor edge as our boundary condition, and then we let the slab evolve dynamically so we can compare with observation. So here's the governing equations. They are conservation of mass, conservation of momentum, conservation of energy, and conservation of compensation. So in order to simplify the equation, we assume the mantle is incompressible and it satisfies the Boussinck approximation, which means the density drives the mantle convection. So we use blue waters to simulate, to do the simulation. So why we use blue waters? That's because the major code, the sitcom we use, has a very good scalability on blue water. And look at this chart. The solid lines are the scalability test on blue water, and the dashed line is on Stampede. So as you can see for our code, it can scale up to more than 10,000 CPUs. But on Stampede, actually, if you use larger CPU, more CPUs, the scalability tends to flatten out. So this is one benefit of blue water. The other benefit is the blue water is very compatible with many with the softwares we use, including the sitcoms and the Direct and FS check, which will be used to simulate the anisotropy. We will talk about this later. And also, blue water has a very large capacity, and so we got a reasonably large allocation, and I think the waiting time in the queue is shorter on blue water. Okay, so let's talk about the model details. So this is the boundary conditions we use. This is like 80 million years ago, and it evolves to present day. We can see the South American actually moves westward, and the Pacific Ocean actually moves eastward, and it subducts beneath the North America. What we see for the color is age of the plate. The older the age, and the denser the plate, which will make it easier to sink into the mantle. And we also incorporate other processes, such as other features, such as cratons here, as shown in white shaded area. And we also include the aseismic ridges, like this one. They have a second crust in the ocean, which is buoyant relative to the mantle. So it will help lift up the slab. So this is the viscosity structure we use. As you can see, we have a very strong subducting plate. It's the oceanic plate, and also very strong slab, and has a very strong continent. We have a weak mantle wedge, which has, weak means low rheology because of partial melting. And we have a weak asthenosphere and a very strong. Strong means high viscosity, lower mantle. As you can see, the viscosity contrast reaches 4 magnitudes. So this actually will cause some problem for the convergence of the solver. So basically, it will slow down the convergence. So here's the model result. What you see for the error is the mantle flow As you can see, at the change, the mantle flow is very complex, and you can see some extreme flow vectors. That's because the extreme viscosity contrast. And for this colored feature is the temperature isosurface of the slab. This is the present slab. You can notice several features like this slab tear. We will discuss later that this tear will have some implication for the earthquakes and the volcanisms. So this model have 8.6 million grids, and the maximum resolution is like 27 kilometers times 20 kilometers in the horizontal direction and 8 kilometers in the vertical direction. So this model is not very big. We use like 1,000 CPUs, and it will be finished in about 150 hours. But we needed to test a lot of these models. That's why it's still time consuming. So this is a prediction. So since we use data simulation for our model, so we can better compare with our model with real observation. So these yellow lines are actually the interpolation of earthquakes. So earthquakes usually happens in the slab, which is predicted by our model as the blue region. So we can see this yellow line and the blue region are very consistent. That's we say, we predict the slab geometry very well in the upper mantle. And in the lower mantle, we don't have earthquakes. But we have other ways to test, to compare our result. That is seismic tomography. Seismic tomography is just like a CT scan. They use seismic waves to figure out the internal structure of the mantle. This background, the blue-red shows the anomalies in the mantle. The blue basically are the slabs. And 5 minutes, okay. And these blue lines are the predicted slabs. We can see again, they are very consistent. And okay, so another interesting feature is the slab gaps. We found when the Seismic ridge subducts, this forms a slab gap. And you can see when the slab gaps forms, there's a certain kind of volcanism. It's called adachite. They are the slab gap and the adachite carries with each other very well. And it also, the slab gaps also related to the earthquakes. For example, here, in this map, we showed several gaps of earthquakes. It is very consistent with the gaps of the slab. So that's why we see, from this model, we can tell in this region there will be less earthquakes. And in this region too, because there's a slab gap. There's no slab, that means no earthquakes. So this is a new interpretation of the flat slab subduction. When the Seismic ridge subducts, because it is buoyant, it tends to lift up the slab, but the surrounding of the material is dense, and it tends to sink faster. The differential motion creates this hole, and the hot thinning field just rises in response to the opening of this slab hole, and it will melt the mantle wedge and forms these adachites. So what we just look at is the present structure, and if we look into the history, there will be other implications. For example, in the Central Andes, we see the volcanism is very sparse between 30 million years ago, but after 30 million years, there are a lot of volcanisms. So what happened? What caused this? From our model prediction, we found at 30 million years ago, there's a very huge slab window. And this slab window will induce a hot and thin field upwelling, which will melt the continent and forms the volcanisms. As shown in this figure, at 40 million years ago, there's no slab gap, so the earthquake is not earthquakes, the volcanism is very sparse. But as the slab gap opens, there are more and more volcanisms. So it's also very consistent with our model prediction. So we also predicted the seismic anisotropy. Like here, we know the mantle is actually anisotropic. The mantle fabric is anisotropic. That means the seismic waves travels along certain direction is faster than along other directions. So by utilizing several codes, we can predict the seismic anisotropy. This is actually the only way we can tell from observation the motion of the mantle. And we got a very good prediction. For example, as these lines, the more blue, that means they are more consistent. So the conclusion is Brewer makes it feasible to run mantle convection models in 3D and with a time scale of hundreds of millions of years. And the implementation of data simulation method is necessary in order to satisfy, in order to compare the observation directly. And the major challenge remains in solving the functions with complex geologies. So we got several publications out of this project, and here's our ongoing research. We try to model the whole Earth. This is a viscosity structure. The most difficult part will be solving the equations along the plate boundaries, like as shown here in the red regions. This is a cross section, and this model is more expensive than previous ones, so it requires 52 million grids, and it's more time consuming and it needs more CPUs. And there are other features in our feature research in our group, and I will just skip this. Yeah, thank you.
All right, we have time for one question.
So a couple times you showed performance in terms of CPUs. What do you define as a CPU? Is it a